I believed my husband was traveling for work. I believed it because the story made sense, because he'd always traveled, because he'd never given me a reason not to trust him, at least not one I couldn't explain away, and because sometimes believing is easier than asking questions you're not ready to answer. The morning he left, he kissed my forehead the same way he always did, quick, distracted, already half somewhere else. 3 days, he said, rolling his suitcase toward the door. Maybe 4 if meetings run long. I nodded, still half asleep. Text me when you land. I will, he replied, already checking his phone. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Nothing dramatic, nothing suspicious, just the sound of a marriage continuing as usual. The first day passed quietly. I worked from home, answered emails, watered the plants he always forgot about. That evening, he texted me a photo of a hotel room, neutral beige walls, generic art, the kind of place designed to look like nothing at all. Long day, he wrote. Miss you. I smiled at my phone. Miss you too. Good luck tomorrow, I replied. If there was guilt in that exchange, I didn't see it. I didn't want to. The second day, I noticed something small. His toothbrush was still in the holder. At first, I told myself he probably packed another one. He traveled often enough to keep spares in his suitcase. Still, I stared at it longer than necessary. Then I laughed at myself. You're tired, I thought. Stop being weird. I went about my day. The third day was when the delivery arrived. It was just afternoon. I was in the kitchen, half listening to a podcast while chopping vegetables, when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the door. A delivery driver stood there, holding a medium-sized box. Package for, he glanced at the label, Ethan Cole? My heart skipped, not because it was strange, but because it wasn't. That was my husband's name. Yes, I said automatically. That's my husband. The driver frowned slightly. He didn't answer his phone, needs a signature. I hesitated. I can sign. He shrugged. Sure. I scribbled my name and took the box. As I closed the door, something about it felt heavy. Not physically, mentally. The return address caught my eye. It was local, very local. Not a company address, not a warehouse. An apartment complex, 10 minutes away. I stood there in the hallway, box in my hands, heart starting to beat faster. Maybe it's something he ordered before leaving, I told myself. But then another thought crept in. Why didn't he ship it to the hotel? I carried the box to the dining table and stared at it. I didn't open it right away. I don't know why. Some instinct, quiet but firm, told me to slow down. I texted him instead. Hey, a package arrived for you, from a local address. Want me to open it? The typing bubble appeared almost instantly, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, oh, yeah, that's nothing. You can open it. Nothing? I swallowed. Nothing had never sounded so heavy. I sliced the tape carefully. Inside was a folded garment bag, and beneath it, a hotel keycard. Not the hotel from the photo he'd sent me. This one had a different logo, a boutique hotel downtown, the kind you don't use for conferences. My fingers went cold. I pulled out the garment bag and unzipped it. Inside was a tailored jacket, not one I'd ever seen him wear. The tag was still on it. Size correct. Style different. Younger. I checked the pocket. A receipt. Date, yesterday. Location, downtown. My breath caught. I sat down slowly, the chair scraping against the floor. Okay, I told myself. Think. Maybe he'd gone shopping on a free afternoon. Maybe he'd stayed somewhere else for one night. Maybe... My phone buzzed. A text from him. Everything okay? I stared at the screen. Why is there a hotel key in your package? I typed. The bubble appeared, stopped, appeared again, then nothing. Minutes passed. 5, 10. My heart pounded louder with every second. Finally, my phone rang. I answered. "Hey," he said, voice tight. "Listen, where are you?" I asked quietly. There was a pause. "On the road," he said, heading back to the hotel. "Which hotel? The one from the photo or the one in my hand?" "I thought you were flying home tonight," I said. "I am," he replied quickly. "Plans changed." I looked down at the box. "At the last minute?" I asked. "Yes," he said, too fast. I closed my eyes. "Ethan," I said softly, "why does this package have a return address from an apartment complex 10 minutes from our house?" Silence. Not static, not a dropped call, just silence. Finally, he exhaled. "It's complicated," he said. That was the moment. The exact moment something inside me shifted, because honest people don't hide behind that word. "Are you having an affair?" I asked calmly. "No," he said immediately. "No, it's not like that." "Then what is it like?" I asked. Another pause. "I'll explain when I get home," he said. "Please, just wait." I looked at the jacket again. The hotel key, the receipt, the local address. "I've been waiting," I said quietly, "for 3 days." He didn't answer. The line went dead. That afternoon stretched endlessly. I paced the house, noticing things I'd never noticed before. A missing shirt, an unfamiliar scent on the coat rack, the way his laptop password had changed last month. Details that once meant nothing now screamed for attention. By evening, I couldn't sit still. I grabbed my keys. I drove to the address on the return label. The apartment complex was modern, clean, expensive. I parked across the street and sat in my car, heart racing. "You're being irrational," I told myself. Then I saw him, Ethan, walking out of the building, not with a suitcase, with a woman. She laughed at something he said, touching his arm casually, familiarly. He leaned in, smiling, a smile I hadn't seen in months. They stopped near the curb. She kissed him. Not a friendly peck, a kiss that assumed permission. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't work. This wasn't a trip. This was a life I wasn't invited into. I watched as he helped her into a car, watched as it drove away, watched as he stood there for a moment, checking his phone, probably looking for my missed calls. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, realizing that the man I trusted had been lying to me with terrifying ease. When he finally walked back into the building, I started my car and drove home, slowly, carefully, because I understood something now. The package wasn't a mistake, it was a crack, and cracks exist for a reason. He came home at 11:47 p.m. I know the exact time because I checked the clock twice, once when I heard the lock turn, and again when I realized my hands were completely steady. That surprised me. I'd expected shaking, tears, anger sharp enough to make my chest hurt. Instead, I felt clear, like something foggy had finally snapped into focus. The door opened slowly, carefully, the way someone enters a room when they already know they're guilty. Ethan stepped inside, suitcase rolling behind him, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. He didn't look tired. He didn't look confused. He looked prepared. "Hey," he said softly, as if volume alone could determine how much damage he'd done. I was sitting on the couch, lights off except for the lamp beside me. The package sat on the coffee table between us, open, unpacked, undeniable. His eyes dropped to it immediately. Of course they did. "You're back late." I said calmly. He swallowed. Flight was delayed. I nodded. From where? He hesitated. That hesitation was louder than any confession. From Chicago, he said finally. I leaned back slightly. Funny, because I saw you downtown today. His face went pale. I watched it happen in real time, the moment the lie collapsed under its own weight. You... what? He asked. I saw you, I repeated evenly, outside the apartment complex on Mercer Street. His suitcase tipped over as he dropped the handle. Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. How long? He asked quietly. How long what? I replied. How long have you known? He said. I tilted my head. That depends. Are you asking how long I suspected, or how long I watched you kiss her? He closed his eyes. That was answer enough. He sat down heavily in the armchair across from me, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together like he was about to pray. I didn't plan for you to find out like this, he said. Did you plan for me to find out at all? I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair, another familiar gesture that suddenly felt foreign. It started months ago, he said finally. I didn't mean for it to. I let out a quiet breath. It always does. He looked up, eyes red. I was lonely. I laughed once, short, humorless. You were married. I know, but things were distant. Distant. That word. The way people use it to excuse betrayal, as if emotional weather justifies moral collapse. You were distant, I said. You didn't talk to me. You didn't tell me you were unhappy. I didn't want to hurt you, he replied. I stared at him. So you lied instead. He flinched. She's not serious, he added quickly. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. I stood up. Not abruptly, deliberately. Do you know what hurts the most? I asked. He looked up at me desperately. What? That you thought I was stupid enough to believe the work trips. That you thought I wouldn't notice the changes, the distance, the way you stopped looking at me. That's not true, he said. You planned an entire second life. Apartments, packages, hotels, lies. That takes effort. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, because he knew I was right. I want you to tell me everything, I said quietly. Everything? He asked. Yes, I replied, because I already know more than you think. He hesitated. Then he spoke. He told me her name, how they met, how long it had been going on. Each word felt like a weight dropping into my chest, but still, I didn't break. Because somewhere along the way, grief had turned into resolve. And the trips? I asked. He rubbed his face. Some were real, some weren't. How many weren't? I asked. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I walked to the dining table and picked up the receipt from the box. This jacket, I said, holding it up. Who was it for? He looked at it and then away. For me, he said, quietly. For her, I corrected. You don't dress like this. She likes it, he admitted. Something inside me hardened. Not anger, detachment. You didn't just cheat, I said. You replaced me. He shook his head. No. Yes, I said firmly. You replaced me in your mind long before I knew. He stood abruptly. I made a mistake. I laughed again, this time louder. Mistakes are forgetting anniversaries, I said. This was a system. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of losing me, fear of losing control. Please, he said, don't do anything rash. Rash, as if honesty were dangerous. What exactly are you afraid I'll do? I asked. He hesitated. Are you afraid I'll leave? I continued. Or are you afraid I'll stay and stop being quiet? That hit him. He sank back into the chair. I don't want to lose you, he whispered. I nodded slowly. Then you should have protected me. That night, I didn't ask him to leave. Not yet. I told him to sleep in the guest room. He didn't argue. He knew better. I lay awake long after the house went quiet, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. But something strange happened. I didn't feel desperate. I felt curious. Curious about the gaps in his story. Curious about the timing. Curious about the apartment. Because something didn't add up. The next morning, after he left early to clear his head, I went back to the package. I examined the return label again. The apartment number, the sender's name. It wasn't hers. It was his. That stopped me cold. Why would he send himself a package? Unless he didn't want it traced to her. Unless he was hiding something else. I searched the address online. Rental listings, property records, and that's when I saw it. The apartment wasn't leased to a woman, it was leased to a company, a shell company, registered 2 months ago. The address matched the dates his trips became more frequent. My heart started to race again, but this time not with heartbreak, with suspicion. I checked our joint account. Large withdrawals, carefully spaced. Not enough to trigger alarms, enough to fund something quietly. This wasn't just an affair, this was preparation. I called my friend Lena, who worked in finance. "Can you look into something for me?" I asked. "Always," she replied. "What's wrong?" "I think my husband is hiding more than another woman," I said. There was a pause. "Send me what you have," she said. I did. Addresses, dates, transactions. 2 hours later, she called me back. Her voice was serious. "You're right," she said. "This isn't just personal." My grip tightened on the phone. "What is it?" I asked. She exhaled. "It looks like he's funneling money, setting something up under the radar." "For what?" I asked. "I don't know yet," she said, "but people don't do this for romance." I hung up and sat there, heart pounding. When Ethan came home that evening, I watched him differently, not as a wife, as an observer, and what I saw confirmed everything. The way he avoided eye contact, the way he guarded his phone, the way he asked, too casually, if I'd been okay. He wasn't worried about my feelings, he was worried about what I knew. That night, as he slept in the guest room, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him again. Not yet. Because the truth was bigger than betrayal. And if he thought the package had ruined everything, he had no idea what was coming. I didn't confront him again. That was the first thing that changed. Old me would have demanded answers immediately, would have needed reassurance, explanations, promises that made no sense but felt comforting in the moment. Old me would have argued until one of us cried, just to feel like something real had happened. But that version of me was built on trust, and trust was gone. So instead, I became quiet, not cold, not distant, observant. That unsettled him far more than anger ever could. For the next 3 days, I played a role I'd never imagined myself capable of. I acted normal. I made coffee in the mornings. I asked about his day. I nodded when he spoke. I didn't bring up the woman. I didn't bring up the lies. I didn't bring up the apartment. And Ethan noticed. He watched me carefully, the same way I had once watched him, trying to read between words, trying to predict the next move. "You're being really calm about everything," he said on the second night, standing in the kitchen while I loaded the dishwasher. "I've had time to think," I replied lightly. "That's good," he said, relieved, too relieved. "I was worried you'd spiral." Spiral. The audacity of that word nearly made me laugh. "I don't want to lose us," he added. I turned to look at him then, really look at him. "Neither do I." I said. It wasn't a lie. I just didn't specify which version of us I was talking about. While he thought things were stabilizing, I was quietly dismantling his illusion. I started with the apartment. Every time he left the house, I checked his location, not through his phone, but through patterns: where he went after work, how long he stayed, which excuses matched which routes. The apartment on Mercer Street became a focal point. He told me he hadn't been there since everything came out. That was a lie. On Thursday afternoon, I watched his car pull into the underground garage from across the street. I didn't need to follow him inside. I just needed confirmation. And I got it. That night, after he fell asleep, I unlocked his laptop. The password hadn't changed. That alone told me something important. People who believe they're in control don't expect betrayal.
I didn't search randomly. I went straight to what mattered: email. There it was, an account I didn't recognize, logged in, saved, unprotected. No inbox full of love notes, no affair cliches, just documents, spreadsheets, invoices, contracts. My pulse quickened. This wasn't romance. This was infrastructure. One folder was labeled logistics, another transfers, another phase 2. I felt cold, very cold. I opened the transfers spreadsheet. Rows and rows of dates, amounts, account numbers. Some matched our joint account withdrawals. Others were unfamiliar, smaller sums routed through third parties, carefully structured, deliberate. I copied everything onto a flash drive I'd prepared earlier that day. I hadn't known exactly what I'd find, but I'd known I would need proof. The next morning, I called Lena again. "I need you to look at something," I said, "and I need you to be honest." She didn't hesitate. "Send it." An hour passed, then 2. When she finally called back, her voice was tight. "This is serious," she said. "How serious?" I asked. She exhaled slowly. "Your husband isn't just hiding money. He's moving it in a way that suggests asset shielding." My grip tightened on the phone. "Shielding from what?" I asked. "To free you from your assets," she said, "and possibly from regulators." My stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," she said carefully, "that the affair may have been a cover or a convenience." "For what?" I whispered. "For leaving, or for something much worse." That night, Ethan brought home flowers. He hadn't done that in over a year. "I thought we could start fresh," he said, setting them on the counter. "They're beautiful," I replied. And they were. Bright, cheerful, completely wrong for the moment. "We've both made mistakes, but we can move past this." We. Always we when accountability felt heavy. I smiled gently. "I agree." His shoulders relaxed. He reached for my hand. "I love you." I didn't pull away. I just said, "I know." That wasn't a lie either. Love doesn't disappear immediately. It just stops being enough. The next piece came from the woman, not directly, from her mailbox. On Saturday morning, I returned to the apartment complex. This time, I walked inside. No one stopped me. The lobby was quiet, anonymous, designed for people who didn't want to be noticed. I checked the directory. The apartment number matched the package, but the name listed wasn't Ethan's. It wasn't hers either. It was the shell company Lena had mentioned. I waited. 30 minutes later, the woman arrived. She was younger than me, stylish, confident, the kind of woman who looked like she'd never doubted her place in a room. She paused when she saw me standing near the elevators. "Can I help you?"
she asked cautiously. I smiled politely. I think you already have. Her eyes narrowed. Do I know you? Yes, I said. You know my husband. Recognition flickered across her face. Then annoyance. Look, she said quickly, whatever he told you, he told me very little. That's why I'm here. She hesitated. Just a second. No, she admitted, but soon. And did he tell you about the company? I asked. Her face went blank. What company? She asked. There it was. She didn't know, which meant she wasn't a partner. She was a distraction, a convenient one. I think, I said gently, you and I are being lied to in different ways. She studied me for a long moment. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because whatever he's doing, I replied, it's bigger than both of us. She didn't respond immediately. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. He told me he needed this place because things were about to get messy, she said. Messy how? I asked. She shook her head. I thought he meant emotionally. I nodded slowly. So did I said. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed next to a man who felt like a stranger, listening to his breathing, memorizing the rhythm of a man who thought he was still ahead of me. I watched the way his chest rose and fell, steady and unbothered, and I felt something strange settle in my bones. Detachment. It wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. Sometime around 4 a.m., I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him. I wasn't going to warn him. I wasn't going to beg or cry or demand answers anymore. I was going to protect myself, and then I was going to expose him. The first call I made the next morning wasn't to a lawyer. It was to my cousin, Mark. Mark worked in forensic accounting. He specialized in the kind of cases people didn't talk about publicly until it was too late. Embezzlement, asset laundering, strategic bankruptcies that left one spouse ruined while the other walked away clean. When I told him he needed help, he didn't ask questions. He just said, "Send me everything." So I did.
The spreadsheets, the shell company records, the transfers Lena had flagged, the timeline of Ethan's trips. I didn't editorialize. I didn't dramatize. I let the data speak. 3 hours later, Mark called me back. "Where is he right now?" he asked. "At work," I replied. "Why?" "Good," he said, "because what he's doing is time sensitive." My heart pounded. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said carefully, "your husband isn't preparing to leave you." I went cold. He's preparing to leave nothing behind. Mark explained it slowly, methodically, the way you explain something dangerous to someone you don't want to panic. Ethan wasn't just moving money. He was hollowing out the marriage, strategically. The shell company wasn't random. It was structured to receive funds in stages, each small enough to avoid scrutiny, each routed through legitimate-looking expenses, consulting fees, travel reimbursements, vendor payments. The apartment? Operational cover, a physical address to justify expenses, deliveries, and time off-grid. The affair? A distraction, something obvious enough that if I discovered it, I'd focus my rage there instead of where it belonged. He was planning a financial disappearance, he said, one where you'd be left questioning your sanity while he walked away clean. I swallowed hard. How close was he? Mark paused. Too close. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I thanked Mark, hung up, and sat perfectly still at the kitchen table. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. This was war. That afternoon, Ethan came home earlier than usual. "Thought we could grab dinner," he said lightly. "Just us." I smiled. "That sounds nice." He relaxed immediately. Mistake. At dinner, I let him talk. About work, about stress, about how things were starting to feel normal again. I nodded. I smiled. I asked questions that made him feel safe.
"How's that consulting project going?" I asked casually. He didn't hesitate. "Busy. Lots of moving parts." "Must be hard managing everything," I said. He shrugged. "I'm good at logistics." I almost laughed. That night, while he showered, I accessed his laptop again. This time, I went deeper. Hidden folders, archived emails, encrypted files he thought I'd never find. And there it was, a draft document titled Separation Contingency Plan. My name appeared exactly twice. Once as spouse, once as non-operational liability. Liability. The word burned itself into my brain. I scrolled. Projected timelines, asset division scenarios, worst-case outcomes. In every version, I lost. The house, the savings, the narrative. In one version, I even lost credibility, a suggested claim that I'd been emotionally unstable after discovering the affair, which explained why I hadn't noticed financial irregularities sooner. My hands trembled, not with fear, with rage so cold it felt surgical. I copied everything, every file, every note, every draft. Then I logged out and closed the laptop, carefully. The next move was legal. Not reactive, preemptive. I contacted a divorce attorney the next morning, one recommended by Mark, a woman named Sylvia who specialized in high asset concealment cases. She didn't flinch when I told her everything. She nodded. "This is textbook," she said, "but he made one mistake." "What?" I asked. "He underestimated you, and he moved too early." She outlined the steps: asset freezes, emergency injunctions, forensic audits. But she also said something that stuck with me. "You need leverage," she said, "and you already have it." I thought of the documents, the transfers, the contingency plan. "He doesn't know that you know," she continued. "That's your advantage." I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt since the package arrived: control. That evening, Ethan was unusually affectionate.
He cooked dinner, poured wine, put on music. It would have been romantic if it weren't so calculated. "You seem different," he said, brushing his thumb along my wrist. "Lighter." "I am," I replied truthfully. He smiled. "I'm glad you didn't blow everything up." I met his eyes. "So am I." The next week was a masterclass in patience. I acted normal. I played the role of the wife who'd been hurt but was healing. I let him believe the affair had broken me just enough to blind me. Meanwhile, Sylvia filed quietly. The courts moved faster than he expected, because financial fraud doesn't wait for emotional closure. The moment everything snapped into place came on a Thursday. Ethan called me from work. "Hey," he said, "I need to stay late tonight." "Of course," I replied. "I might be out of town tomorrow, too," he added. "Last-minute thing." I smiled to myself. "Okay," I said. "Drive safe." After we hung up, I checked my email. There it was. Notice of asset freeze, effective immediately. His accounts, our joint accounts, the shell company, all frozen. I sat back in my chair and exhaled slowly. He had no idea yet, but he was about to. The first sign that everything had collapsed came at 9:14 a.m. My phone buzzed while I was sitting at the kitchen table, calmly drinking coffee, watching sunlight spill across the floor like nothing in the world was wrong. It was Ethan. I didn't answer. The second call came less than a minute later, then a text. "Did you touch the accounts?" I stared at the screen, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. I waited 5 full minutes before replying. "Touch what accounts?" The typing bubble appeared instantly, disappeared, appeared again. "My cards are declined. The company account is frozen. Something is wrong." Something is wrong. I almost laughed. Instead, I stood up, rinsed my mug, and placed it in the drying rack like this was just another morning. Then I replied, "That's strange. Maybe it's just a system error."
The phone rang immediately. This time, I answered. "What did you do?" he demanded, panic bleeding through the edges of his voice. I leaned against the counter. "Good morning to you too." "This isn't funny," he snapped. "I'm locked out of everything." "I'm sure it'll resolve itself," I said calmly. "Have you tried calling the bank?" There was silence on the other end, followed by heavy breathing. "They said it was court-ordered," he said slowly. "They wouldn't tell me anything else." I smiled. "Then I guess it's not a system error," I said. "You did this," he said. Not a question, an accusation. I tilted my head. "Did I?" "Why?" he demanded. "After everything we talked about, after I told you the truth." "The truth?" I interrupted gently. My voice was steady, controlled. "You told me a truth. You didn't tell me the truth." His breathing grew erratic. "What are you talking about?" he asked. I walked over to the window and looked out at the street. People were going about their lives, deliveries were being made. Somewhere, another doorbell would ring. "I'm talking about the shell company," I said. "The asset shielding, the contingency plan." The silence this time was absolute. Then, "You went through my computer?" he whispered. I smiled again. "You went through my life," I replied. "Consider us even." "You had no right," he said hoarsely. "I had every right," I replied. "You made me a liability, remember?" He exhaled sharply. "You don't understand what you've done." "Oh," I said softly, "I understand perfectly." His voice dropped. "You've ruined me." I closed my eyes for a moment. "No," I said, "I stopped you." He came home that afternoon, not composed, not prepared, panicked. The front door slammed so hard the walls rattled. He stormed into the living room, eyes wild, tie loosened, shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it. "You went to a lawyer," he said. "Yes," I replied. "You froze everything," he continued. "Yes," I repeated. "You exposed confidential business information." "No," I said calmly. "I exposed fraud." He laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "You think this makes you powerful?" he asked. "You think you've won?" I met his gaze. "I think you underestimated me, and that's the only mistake that matters." He stepped closer. "You have no idea what you've done to my future." I didn't flinch. "You already decided my future without me. I just took my name off your plan." He looked at me then, not as his wife, not as someone he could manipulate, but as an obstacle he hadn't anticipated. Fear flickered across his face. Real fear. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. I considered that. "I want the truth on record," I said. "I want my name cleared. I want every dollar you moved traced and returned, and I want you gone." He swallowed. "And if I don't agree?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "Then the investigation continues," I said, "and the contingency plan you wrote for me becomes evidence against you." His shoulders sagged. That was the moment he understood. The affair hadn't destroyed him. The lies hadn't destroyed him. The package hadn't destroyed him. His certainty had. The following weeks unfolded with brutal efficiency. Forensic accountants combed through everything, every transfer, every shell, every attempt to disappear money quietly. The story was no longer husband cheats on wife. It was husband attempts financial erasure, and courts do not look kindly on that. Ethan tried to negotiate, tried to charm, tried to spin narratives where he was overwhelmed, misunderstood, under pressure. None of it worked, because numbers don't care about excuses, and neither do judges. The other woman called me once. She sounded shaken. "I didn't know about the money, about any of it." "I know," I replied. "What happens now?" she asked.
I step away, I said. So should you. She didn't argue. The divorce was finalized faster than he ever imagined it would be. Asset division was recalculated, funds were returned, protections were put in place, and the narrative he'd written, the one where I was unstable, emotional, too distracted by betrayal to notice theft, collapsed completely, because the record showed otherwise. I wasn't emotional, I was precise. The day he moved out, he stood in the doorway for a long moment. "You never loved me the way I needed," he said quietly. I looked at him, not with anger, not with pity. "I loved you honestly," I replied. "You needed control." He left without another word. Life didn't become perfect after that, but it became mine again. I redecorated the living room, changed the locks, changed my routines. I slept better, laughed easier, trusted myself again. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about that delivery driver, how close everything had been to staying hidden, how easily the lie could have continued. And I realized something important. Truth doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes in a cardboard box. Sometimes it comes with a name written clearly on the label. Sometimes it arrives when you're finally ready to open it. I believed my husband was traveling for work, until a delivery driver handed me a package with his name, and in doing so, handed me my life back.